Good. Hello. Welcome to DM and DMer episode 6. My name is Nate Peterson. You've probably heard me before, whether it be on earlier episodes of this little series or whether it's on episodes of the Dice and Desire Actual Play podcast. Nice little intro. That's probably the smoothest one I've ever done. Little pound the back for me. Not sure if that got picked up on the microphone, but there you go. Episode 6. As previously announced, both on social media and on these shows, episode 6 is the end of season 1. I had originally intended for these shows to be long running, but after a couple of episodes I realised that aside from the actual interviewing process of speaking to my guests, there was a lot of editing that came with it. And I'm not an editor. I'm not really naturally that type of person. I'm not technically gifted enough to really produce something that is stellar from an audio point of view. And so I just realised that the amount of time that I was putting into it after the interview was actually a lot more than what I was putting in for the actual interview itself. And I decided that I just want to play games. I just want to do other things. So I'm taking a bit of a break after this episode. We will be back, I'm sure. There's plenty of other people I want to talk to. And whether that's even with revisiting old guests. I know at least one or two of the guests that we've had on have said to me, I'd love to come on and talk about some other things that I didn't get a chance to. So this will be back. Now, whether that'll be this year or next year, I don't know. But DM and DMer will definitely be back. But to go out with a bang, I decided to get a guest on who is just a lovely guy. On social media, if you follow Romancing the Dungeon, you will be very aware of their DM, Declan. He's very active on the social medias, certainly on Twitter. His big presence, and I just decided that I needed to get him on and talk to him. It coincided with the fact that he invited me onto his show, which I talk about very briefly in this show here. And we did a one-shot over there called Couples Retreat. And it was a one-shot with a couple of their players, myself, and a guy on Twitter called 5e Trash, which some of you may be aware of, John. And that was just tremendous fun. And yeah, the two things, the stars aligned, and I thought I'd have to get him on here to talk to him, as well as, promoting our stuff over there. So, with that said, what do we get into on this episode of DM and DMer with Declan? There's a lot of D's going on there. Well, we talk about his work life. Declan's a teacher, and we talk about what it's like in the modern age for him to teach, what his history is with teaching, and also that then flows into a little bit of discussion about imposter syndrome. It's something that he says he suffers with. I certainly suffer with it from time to time. We're both dungeon masters, and I think it's fair to say that a lot of dungeon masters probably have similar views and feelings because sometimes we need a bit of validation. We need to know that our storytelling is working for the numerous people around our tables. So we talk about that, and then we get into just general TTRPG talk, talking about his history, talking about his DMing, and then obviously we finish out the show with the usual the last in the series of Play Your Bards Right. Will Declan bring a record-breaking score to close out the season? You have to wait and see. Or just, skip towards the end of this if you really can't wait to find out. Listen, rambled way too long, nearly 4 minutes, over 4 minutes. Thank you. I just want to say thank you very much to everyone that's listened, everyone that's interacted, everyone that's made this possible. I want to thank also my 6 guests. Stuart, Will, James, Hamilton, Mike, and Declan. As I say, some of those may be back. If not, new faces, if and when this returns. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's a great way to go out. And yeah, if you've not had enough of this voice, you can always just listen to the rest of Dice and Desire, or re-listen to it if you've listened to it before. I'm still rambling, it's nearly 5 minutes. Right, I've finished talking, so let's go over to me talking more. Bye. Is there anything you do want to talk about? Anything that's really pressing on your mind, aside from D&D and TTRPGs, that just in the world, in life, in your day-to-day life, or the world itself?
Um, See, I'm in kind of a weird flux at the moment. I went for a new job and kind of in my field, but it was a bit of a kind of a big sideways step. So I teach full time, and outside of that, then I also work with students and learners who may have learning difficulties.
Okay.
So and that can be that runs the spectrum. That can be anything from ADHD to dyslexia, dyspraxia, uh, even general sort of time management issues. Um, and there was a posting recently and in another college in another part of the country, and I was like, I'll go for it and I'll just see what I'll do. And I went, did the interview, got offered the second round interview, and I was delighted with myself. Yeah, and I sat there for I was delighted. I was really chuffed that I made, like anybody would be, you're like, oh, you're through to the next round or something. And I sat there and I was like, I'm delighted, I impressed them to make it to the next round. I just don't know, am I delighted that I'm one step closer to this job? And I was making a decision, I think, to leave my current position and my current career on a what was a very not normal year. And like that's this, like I know people are like, oh, it's different for doctors and it was different for teachers and it was different for office workers. Yeah, your job, everyone's job is different. That's a no-brainer. But there were aspects to the job that I absolutely love. I love teaching, and that moment where you've explained something to a student, you've talked it out, you've demonstrated, um, and you kind of hand the reins over to them, and you watch as they kind of navigate that software for the first time, or they give you the first draft of a script. Um, and that wasn't there this year. And I'm I'm like a weird energy vampire. I put some. I like to think I put like 110% of myself into my classes, the same way I do. Like what most of us do. If we're passionate about something, we put a lot of. Nate, you'll need to interject. I'll keep talking. I clocked myself. I'm like, I think I've talked for 10 hours now.
Oh,
Uh,
right. Well, listen. I think every guest I've had on has said exactly the same thing, right?
okay.
This show is for you guys. This is the whole point of having DM and DMer. It is to highlight and spotlight people like your good self, and to
Okay.
give you a place to talk about, as well as TTRPG and DMing and all that sort of side of life. Just to give people an opportunity to find out about you as a
Okay.
person, because most people will know you from romancing the dungeon or something else. I don't know if you've got anything else on it, but they'll know you from a very a one position thing.
Mm.
You're a human being, Declan. You've got he
Questionable.
shook it. Yeah, he questions it. But you've got a myriad of passions and facets to your personality that might not necessarily get highlighted. So it's this is why I want these things. Do not worry about talking
Okay.
too long. It's absolutely fine.
Okay.
It means
Uh,
less for me to do.
okay. uh, so I guess what I was kind of saying was, when you put yourself into into a project or into your work, uh, there's a big part of yourself that's given over to that, like, and not just your energy or your time, but a little bit of your creative, or a lot of your creative self goes into that. And we often talk about if something doesn't make you happy, walk away from it and stuff like that. And like, I go into the classroom, and not every class is going to be that moment where there's a click, and a student has picked something out. It doesn't have to be. I absolutely love and I hate the word, but I love the banter in my classroom. Because like, it isn't, let's sit down and you stay quiet for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours while I deliver this lecture. It's interject, raise a point, ask a question, give me your thoughts on it, and I don't care if it's it doesn't have to be cited in research and fact. It can be just your general feeling. It's the nature of what I teach. A lot of my subjects tend to be quite subjective anyway. We certainly have tools that we can use to critically analyze something or engage with something or deconstruct something. But I want to know how that made you feel. I want to know what part of the film or the radio documentary or even the poem evoked something in you or made you feel like, I mean, if you felt, God, I was so absolutely, utterly, entirely bored, and I checked out as as we were reading it, as we were watching it, as we were listening to it, well, that's still valid. Like, why? Why was there a disconnect between you and that thing? And what I ended up with a lot this year, you don't get that. It's very difficult to get that same response through online. And there's a really nice correlation between a classroom, a teacher and students, and a DM and their players. And for me, and I know for a lot of DMs out there, we are, a good chunk of us can be really hit with imposter syndrome. My problem is I get that in my job as well. I will finish I'll finish a week. It could be 5 days of back-to-back classes, demonstrations, tutorials, skills demos, whatever it might be, and come away from it and just be like, that was like, what are you doing? Like, you've no idea what you're doing. You've no idea, if you're having an impact on these students. You're gonna get caught eventually, and people will know that you're not doing your job properly. And the same thing happens to me when I play tabletop role playing games. I rely very, and it's not that I need my students or my players to pat me on the head and give me a gold star at the end of the day, going, "Good job, I learned from you." Or it's a lot of it for me is very internalized. A lot of that imposter syndrome. It's not about how. I mean, players walk away smiling, and students walk away with their certificates, and they've progressed into university or and degree programs or whatever it might be, and that's phenomenal. But for me, it's the I don't want to say the fear. Oh, yeah, you know what? The fear. It's the fear of letting people down. And I carry that into my tabletop games, and in a big way. I'm always worried that my session is boring. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't engaging. And this year, above all else, I really got caught with that. And I was kind of hoping that maybe a D&D session might pull me out of it. Like if I run another campaign, maybe I'll get the serotonin that I need from that. And I'm lucky. I'm a very lucky. I'm a very lucky teacher, and I'm a very lucky dungeon master. I have phenomenal people around my table, and I'm very lucky to have every year to have some really brilliant and engaging and creative students that really respond and just pick up and dive into the material and dive into their subjects. So yeah, I guess the kind of the crux of it is what I've been trying to do an awful lot, particularly over the last couple of weeks, and since as a teacher in Ireland, we are off from June, July, and August. So I've plenty of time to self-reflect, and pick up 10 more passion projects or whatever it might be. Did you know that lavender is an exceptionally difficult plant to keep alive, by the way? Second year in a row, I've had to buy a new one, and second year in a row, I've killed another one. So gardening, not my forte. DMing and teaching are my forte. And what I was saying about that job was I was making a decision based on what was not a normal year. And even with Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop role playing games in general, although I am literally only running D&D at the moment, which is I need to add a few other systems to my belt, I think, in some new campaigns. What I was kind of trying to get at is I spend an awful lot of time in my head wondering if my students are okay and if my players are okay. and very little time thinking, which is, if you've seen me on the internet and you've engaged with me on Twitter, you're like, oh, he's very self-obsessed. I'm actually not. I don't like to think about myself. I like to maybe present myself that I do.
I'm gonna unpack a lot there. You have done a lot of talking, and I'm glad you've done a lot of talking. But I'm gonna do a lot of unpacking of what you've just done there and what you've just said. Right? Okie dokie. Right. I'm taking about 10 steps backwards. Right.
Okay.
First thing you said there about teaching. What is it you actually teach? What is your what is your your lessons consisting of?
Okay, so predominantly I teach in the field of media studies. My own background, I worked in television and film production. I worked in radio program production as well. And what I'm currently teaching, it is a mix. I'm quite fortunate. It's a mix of both film and radio. Uh, on top of that, then, because of my degree, my primary degree in English and sociology, I occasionally, well, for the last 4 years, I've had English literature as one of my core subjects, which I absolutely love. And every second year, I've had political science under my belt as well. So I'm quite lucky. There's a really nice sort of wrap around between media, English, and politics that go quite well. But I don't teach them all to the same students. I have different classes. So I will have a year of students that are, they are radio heads, they're anoraks, they want to learn about podcasting, they want to learn about radio station management, they want to learn about sound editing. And I will have, film heads that are, obsessed with, the not even the latest blockbusters. With such a diverse background every year, you've got your the Marvel movie. Everything has to be a Marvel movie, and then you'll have your art house students, and then you'll have your documentary students. So, and then I obviously teach kind of liberal arts or arts-based programs as well. So that's my wheelhouse, and that's my full-time job outside of my hobbies.
And is that how did you come to that sort of? So obviously Stuart, very first guest that we had on here, is also a teacher, music teacher. He's a musical man. Is that? Did you go into media studies, for example, because of that's a passion of yours, or was it just something you were particularly good at, analysing? I guess I would imagine the two go in hand in hand. If you're passionate about something, you end up being able to maybe criticize or not criticize, critique something and be able to look at it in a more considered way. But has that always been like an area that you've been like particularly passionate about, or was it just something you sort of maybe not fell into, but sort of just discovered that was a suitable thing for you?
So when I was doing my masters, I spent a year teaching. I don't know if they have an equivalent in the UK educational system, but we have a year called transition year where students, they're kind of, they operate outside the main curriculum. So they're not taking exams, they're not doing it. Like it's like a gap year, but you're still a student, you're still in the school. Um, and I was teaching those students, and I absolutely hated it. Did not. Again, I was 20, turning 21. Did not have the patience or the mindset really for that job. Spent a good few years then working for production companies here in Ireland. I spent a bit of time doing voluntary projects, working on kind of exhibitions and stuff like that, editing, and just kind of liaising with people on how to get good sound or whatever it might be. And then the recession happened. that little thing that scuppered many a millennial, and many other people outside of that. But I decided to move home. So I was living and working in Dublin, and I decided to move home, which is the other side of the country. And weirdly enough, I spent the next year and a half or so looking for work. Really wasn't much out there. And then I did one of those god awful government run internship programs. And it basically free labor. And got into the college that I'm working. And I was working as an intern for their media department and their adult education department, and loved it. Really loved the people I was working with, and it was great. I was working with students, but I wasn't teaching the students. And occasionally I might maybe demo if someone came up and I don't know how to get this working, or is after going into this weird mode. How do I, how do I do it? And that I was a little bit older. I was enjoying it. It was nice. Cue me getting offered a full-time administrator's role with the college after that. So I was offered a full-time job right out of that, which was fantastic. And I spent the next 4.5, 5 years as a office administrator for the college, working in admissions. And then towards the last year of that, I was very kind of, again, not disillusioned. It's that sort of, itchy feet that we kind of get, I think, particularly our generation and the next generation. Staying in one place for like 40 or 50 years kind of freaks me out. Or doing the same thing for 40 or 50 years kind of freaks me out a little bit. And I decided that I was going to maybe look for something else and see how I got on with it. You might notice a trend here. And one of the assistant directors or principals in the college was like, you're very good with the students. You respond very well to them. You have a lot of experience, in kind of student affairs, student council and stuff like that. Why don't we maybe move you more into a student support role where you were working with the students and kind of easing their transition from secondary school into kind of college level, and putting on more kind of fun events and stuff like that. And I was like, sure, that sounds great. Little did I know that the same person who put me forward for that had her own little mischievous plan in place, and she had been someone who had pushed me a lot to get myself registered to be a teacher. I had my degree and I had my 2 postgraduates done, and she was very keen that I get registered. And that same year, I got teaching council registered. You have to be teaching council registered in Ireland to go into a school. I'm sure there's a similar system in the UK. And but about a month after I got teaching council registered, a position opened up in the media department. And that woman pretty much told me if I didn't go for it, she'd make my life, hell. Which was, that was. Do you mind if I just check on that? That was.
Is that the woman making hell?
Yeah, possibly. So that sounded way worse than it actually was. A cat, one of my cats knocked my steel water bottle into the sink.
That definitely sounded like a Paranormal Activity, like the whole kitchen had just exploded moment.
I just thought something had literally, again, I had assumed it was one of the cats, but had knocked like a load of stuff off the counter. Nope, just a steel bottle into the sink.
Right.
But so I was saying, she, this colleague, more or less, gave me the push to get into teaching, and I did. Did the interview, got the job, and I've been doing it. I'm coming into my 5th year now as a teacher, and it's, I think, out of all the jobs, and there's been a myriad of different jobs and different roles. It's the one that I feel like I was meant to do, if that makes any kind of sense.
Well, certainly from the way you're talking about it, and certainly what you were saying earlier about being, an energy vampire and wanting to feed off of students and stuff like that. You don't get that. If it's, when I say feed off of students, sorry, that's probably the wrong way to put it. But point being is, if you don't have a passion for a job, or if you don't enjoy your job, then you're not going to care about those sort of things. And it's the same with the imposter syndrome, which is another thing I wanted to come on to. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's people out there in jobs that they dislike or hate or whatever, and they have that same mentality of imposter syndrome, because in actual fact, probably even more so, because you might sort of think, shit, they haven't discovered me, that I'm doing this thing that I shouldn't be doing all along. But I've learned over the last year, I think in particular, imposter syndrome seems like, to me personally, seems like a very new concept. It probably isn't. But like the first time I heard the term imposter syndrome was probably only a couple of years ago or something like that.
Okay.
And over the last year, it seems like everybody I talk to has it in some way, whether it's their work, whether it's their passion, whatever it might be. And you mentioned there about DMing. Like, well, obviously we'll come into DMing in a little bit, but it's very true. I think a lot of us, certainly that I've spoken to in the community, so to speak, just have that. And I think to not have it at your own work, you're forging a career. Someone is paying you to do something. Now, if you enjoy it, especially, someone's paying you to do something that you enjoy or semi-enjoy, whatever it might be. There's always going to be that. Surely you'd have to be so confident to not have that. There's not that many people are confident these days. But what I would say is, I mean, it's obviously a bit difficult, I guess, with students. I don't really know. I've not had that relationship, I guess, or I've had it from the other side. I've not had the teacher side of it. But if kids seem happy in your class, if people seem genuinely engaged and they're asking questions or they're making comments, I think you're doing your job, right? I mean, you might get to the end of the year and they might not get the exam results that you'd like or anything like that. But ultimately, if they're sitting in silence and not reacting and not taking on anything or anything like that, then you could probably say maybe there's a disconnect here, something's not going right. But if you are getting that from your students, which it sounds like you are from what you said, whether that's wholesale or not, I would imagine every class is going to have those students that do better and those students that do worse, or those that are getting more engaging or those that don't, whether that's their personality thing, whether that's a relationship thing. You might get some students that just are quiet and they just don't want to speak. They don't want to have that sort of thing because they just don't want to stand out. But it doesn't mean you're not engaging with them. It doesn't mean they're not taking in every single word. And I guess that's the problem with the type of job you do, because you are dealing with, I mean, how many people have you got in a class generally?
Again, on a general term, it's 20 people. So you'll have 20 people in front of you.
It's when you're in a meeting with like my type of work, I'm an accountant. When I'm dealing with a client, it's 1-to-1. If I'm dealing with somebody I'm managing, it's 1-to-1, and it's easy to gauge that. When you've got a room of 20 people, to gauge how they're all doing, because you obviously want them all to be up here.
Yes, yeah.
And sometimes they might not be for whatever reason, but it's hard to gauge where they are because of, like you say, that interaction. But I can't imagine there's any student that isn't engaged by the wonderful Declan.
There's been a few, but it's interesting because it's often those are the students then that you might try the hardest with. And I even know myself as when I was studying, that there's always going to be subjects that you just don't gravitate towards, even if it's a course that you want to do, it's your dream course, and suddenly you're going to find out, well, actually, as part of that dream course, there's an entire module that you are going to resent for the entire year, and you'll struggle the whole way through it. And I often remember in that case, that was the lecturer that always stood out the most for me, because they were the ones that really kind of honed in on me in that way of, we don't get to do everything we like all the time. There's going to be things that we're going to have to learn and engage with, and those are often and weirdly enough, those are the classes and those are the lectures that I remember the most and that I now draw on a lot to support what I'm doing. And I've been quite fortunate. I don't think I've ever had a lecturer or a teacher in, like, let's say from secondary school onwards, that I was like, no, I didn't. Weirdly enough, the first year I interviewed to be a teacher, my old Irish teacher was on the interview panel, and he opened the door, and because obviously he had a list, and I don't know if it's because he had, obviously my name was on the list. Maybe he forgot my name, but maybe he didn't put two and two together. But he opened the door and he got like the shock of his life when I was sitting. I was like, oh, and I called him sir. It's that kind of ingrained into you. I was like, hello, sir, and he was, oh, you can call me Jim, and I was like, nope, not happening. Sorry, not able to. I felt really bad for the other two people that were in the room because it looked like I knew the guy, and I was like, it's for me, definitely. But yeah, I think a lot of it is just because I think confidence is a major and because you twigged that a moment ago, Nate. I like to think I come across as very confident. I'm not, and it's something I would often say to a lot of my students as well. Is that the ability to appear confident is confidence. That's just don't let people know you're panicking and or you're anxious or you're nervous, and that will substitute for whatever confidence is meant to be. I am If I'm not bricking it over something, there's something wrong. Like if I'm not anxious or like, okay, I can't do this. I like weirdly enough, you could put me in a room with 1,000 people and say, any chance you could just go out there and address the crowd and just fill 5 or 10 minutes. I could do it absolutely no problem at all. It's not going to be an issue. You put me in a room with 5 people and go around in a circle and have where it's more intimate, where it's there's more sort of a magnifying lens on you. Those are the things that they're the ones that I often kind of get the most sort of anxious about. Are they picking up on the like, am I carrying my nerves in my voice? Am I a little too, because there's like, I mean, this is going to be a podcast, okay? But you'll know that I speak with my hands. Like my hands are going literally 90. I like, am I doing too much of that? Did I swear? Did I forget something? Did I mispronounce something? My head will go through that constantly. But the exact opposite happens then. The more people, I don't know what it is, but the more people that are there, I just tend to kind of just see kind of a wave or a wall and just be like, it's grand, whatever. With the classroom and the
It's that eye contact thing, isn't it? It's a case of, obviously, like you just said there at the beginning of that, it's the intimacy. It's you are talking to a person about, it's probably as well. Like I would imagine, like you say, it's also probably the subject that you're talking about. Like you said, if you are being asked to go and fill 5 minutes in front of a crowd, you'll just talk general, quote unquote, nonsense just to fill that time. If you're talking to somebody, whilst there might still be an element of that being the agenda, depending on what the circumstances are, but you'd have to be a bit more. You can't just go up to one person and sort of like just generally sort of go, anyway, so they're going to be along in a minute, and you wouldn't talk the same way that you would on stage. So it's probably just having that confidence in, well, not confidence, but like you said, maybe in yourself, and what you're talking about. Whereas filling 5 minutes can be done, I guess. What's the worst that gets happened? You get booed off stage or booed off wherever you are.
A colleague of mine, he retired the same year I started. He retired a couple of months later. He gave me a piece of advice, and it's the one thing that I go back to quite a bit. Because, like we were saying, if I walk out into a room and I'm addressing, an auditorium of people, it's a bit of a performance. There's a bit of it's like that, like you said, not everyone's gonna like you. People might boo you, but you can be a bit more relaxed. I find that like that performative element, I'm quite comfortable in and I'm quite confident in, and it's the thing that's kind of seen me through my career as a teacher. In that, as a teacher, you are performing. You are, if you want to keep your learners engaged, if you want to keep them, their attention. Anyone can stand in a room and deliver a PowerPoint presentation or play a YouTube clip or hand out, a copy of a Wordsworth poem or whatever it might be and read it. Anyone can do that. But the job requires you to be able to convey a deeper meaning or a deeper understanding of what that is. And that's when Mike retired, it was the one piece of advice he gave me was that, just imagine yourself on stage and that you are performing to a small group. And he said the nerves don't really matter. And it's something it's something I haven't really forgotten. And occasionally it's something I go back to. I try to remind myself, you are in effect performing this role. You are, you're there as a teacher, you're acting as support, you're acting as an advisor, an instructor, and occasionally a confidant or something like that. But and then you're an assessor then as well down on top of it, and all those things. With that in mind, make the job a lot easier in a big way. Because I don't mind performing. I can if it means you can learn and you can engage with queer theory or Marxism, or we can take a look at audience theory, whatever it might be, or I can teach you how to Adobe Audition. And I have to kind of clown it up a small bit. I have to kind of perform a little bit for you to keep that. Then that's not a problem. That's something I can do happily.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is as well for you is obviously like coming back to the group of people you've got to try and do that, but equally to try and engage with 20 different people who learn in different ways. So, your best student might you perform in a certain way that might hit your best student. But if the people at the bottom, or even just anyone else in that, doesn't understand it in the same context, you've got to think about how you do that. And I can totally understand how you've got how nerve wracking it can be, and how those imposter syndrome. Because the other thing is, well, you do have to appear confident, because if you've got a teacher at the front that's going, well, I think that, whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you as a student necessarily confidence in what you're being taught is correct, or not. With obviously with the type of work you do, I guess there's levels of correctness as well. If you're a maths teacher, there's a right number, whereas with drama and media and all that sort of stuff, a lot of it's interpretation, I would imagine, and a lot of it picking up on themes. And sometimes somebody might come to you with something you've not thought about, and so there's not always. I'm sure there's wrong answers, but there's not always necessarily, I guess, clear-cut, definite right answers. It's all about interpretation. And all that sort of stuff.
And it's fantastic when someone comes to you and they understand it, and their work reflects that. Those are the easy students. They're the ones that you're like, you've got a good handle on this. You've got this down. That's great. And they'll engage and they'll ask and they'll question and so on and so forth. It's the student who is struggling or disconnected. That's the as we were saying, that's the challenge, and it's trying to find a way that the lesson, the material becomes accessible and engaging for them, because like you were saying, it's not always going to how I approach a class is not going to appeal to everybody in a class of 20 or a room of 20. So we have to find a balance there, and again, like I was saying, not every student is going to like you anyway. There's always going to be personalities and a clash, because we're at that stage where it's not a case of you sit there silently for an hour or 2 hours while I recite verbatim off my PowerPoints. The classroom is an open discussion learning place when I'm in the room, so I'm very open to people interjecting and trying to make a point, or even asking a question. And there's a lot to be said for a student who will put their hand up or ask a question, knowing that they might not have all the information or even have half the right answer. But I've always said it, and it's something I maintain today, is if you're sitting there in my class and you don't understand something, I've said, if we think about last week when we were looking at this, and last week you were sitting there going, I didn't get that, and now you're telling me to apply it to something else, and I don't get that. I don't get two things now. Chances are there's somebody else in this room who doesn't know this. And if I'm looking at a sea of faces that are nodding and half smiling or even asleep, that's a visual cue for me to go, well, it seems to be okay. And I'll ask, does everyone get this? That's your chance to go, no. Yeah, you've made a balls of it. Can you go back and can we start from scratch and move through it? And when those moments happen, those are the best moments in any classroom, because it's a chance to really tear something apart, bring it down to its most base form, and guide your students through it. And if you have to do that, you've done that already, but you now have to come at it from a different angle, because the first time you did it, there were people that didn't get it, that it just didn't click with. And the challenge then comes, and this is kind of like it's like an ad-libbed or ad hoc lesson. You have to kind of go, okay, if that didn't work, if I recite that again, well, go look at your handout. I said that last week. Go look at the screen cap of the recording. They didn't get it when you did it that way. You have to do it another way. You have to figure it out and kind of pull it up. And like you were saying, Nate, I'm quite lucky. There's a subjective element to a lot of my subjects. There's a really nice interpretive element to my subjects. And I love it. I absolutely love it when we've watched something or we've listened to something or we've read something, and a student will just come out with a completely proper right angle thought process on something. And I've sat there in class and I've had a student question something that we were watching, and why the validity of a piece of film, as an instructional tool or whatever it might be, and sat there and been like, wow, it's not something I'd ever considered. My viewpoint very much has gone like this, and you're over here and you're giving me just something completely out of nowhere. I love those moments, and if I have to sit there in kind of stunned silence for a couple of seconds, not my job to turn and go, no, you're wrong. No, that's not. I mean, if you're using a term, if we're talking about mise en, and you're trying to give an example of it, and that example is wrong, then it's my job to go, well, no, you're discussing another aspect to it. This is what mise en scène is, and this is the example that we can go with, and show them that example, try to make that work. But if a student sits there and watches something and is like, wow, the themes here are very, you think it's about this, but there's an undercurrent or a subtext to this that's just really carried out through the work of the lighting or the color or whatever it might be, or even the choice of editing techniques. That's the stuff that I live for in my classes, when students get to bring their thoughts and their ideas and their energy, because that's the stuff that sustains you. That's the stuff that kind of like makes it all worthwhile at the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every person and every child in that kid in that room has obviously got their own brain and their own way of thinking about things. And even if it's stuff that you already know, it's just interesting to see how different people will interpret things or come at things from different angles. And obviously, like you said, there's going to be times that people don't necessarily get it, or they have difficulties with it. But like you say, that's then that's a teaching moment. That's the point where you can actually step in and sort of like try and break it down and help. Because as I think I said earlier, not everybody, probably because of imposter syndrome or something similar, not everyone is happy to put their hand up and admit they don't know what's going on. Especially kids, to some degree. I would imagine kids probably more so than others, because especially formative ages where they might worry about whether they're going to look stupid in front of their peers, or whatever. They haven't maybe got the confidence that being wrong sometimes isn't the problem. It's not. There's nothing wrong with saying I don't understand this. And so that's obviously, like you said, it's a good moment for you as a class, and it's a teaching moment, and it helps maybe some other kid that didn't want to put their hand up, that didn't want to, that was having the same problem, but didn't have necessarily the confidence to raise it in front of everyone.
Yeah.
Do you have a particular film or radio piece or whatever that you particularly enjoy going over?
So there's a few, but I think it's been brought back into the foray quite a bit because of RuPaul's Drag Race. But there's a film by Jenny Livingston from the 1989-1990, Paris is Burning, and I don't get me wrong, it's not if you're taking it by today's standards, there's some quite problematic elements to it, but for a piece that explores queer identity and queer identity among POC, we've got a really fascinating exploration of the ballroom culture and scene in New York in the late 80s, early 90s, and it's one of my favorite documentaries. I keep it on my curriculum. Every year I try to add new things and change things up, so the students go, oh god, he showed us that last year or whatever. I always try to bring in something different. So that's a staple. It's one of my, we're watching this, there's no way out of it, we're definitely watching it. There's one of my favorite one of my favorite radio documentaries, and now the name of the producer is gone out of my head. But the documentary is available on BBC Radio, and it is called Ballad of the Blade, and it is an absolutely phenomenal piece of media and documentary and radio documentary. If you want to go down, that little ladder of subsections, but it's sort of quite a creative exploration of quite a serious issue, and it explores the knife crime in some of the more disadvantaged areas in London and parts of the UK, and the narration through it is by the poet laureate of the young poet laureate, I think, actually, of the United Kingdom at the time, and it's a beautiful piece of poetry that narrates from the perspective of the weapon, of the knife, then juxtaposed to the lived experiences of young men who carried out these crimes, have rehabilitated, and even the mother of a victim. And it is, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's quite a heavy piece. You know what I mean? It's not,
Yeah.
and I always preface it with my students that, if this is something that you are, I mean, it doesn't go into heavy, gory detail, but it does talk about, gang violence. And, I always preface my class with, this might be upsetting to some people. And if that's the case, feel free to leave, and, I'll always give another option, for something else to listen to. But those are my staples in my documentary classes. So I teach radio documentary and I teach film documentary, and those two pieces never leave. They never leave my my curriculum and my must watches and my must listens. I sound quite pretentious. I also listen to a lot of stuff for fun too, by the way. I'm not just sitting here going, let's watch a good documentary on the BBC. I will watch. I mean, what was it? I watched Masters of the Universe all in one sitting. Phenomenal. Absolutely loved it. Was not what I was expecting at all. That seems to have pissed off a good chunk of the internet, which is great. I loved it. Quite excited to see where it goes. Evil Lynn was one of my favorite characters growing up as a kid. So to have her getting this huge thing, I was like, yes. So I was very, and that was Lena. It's Lena Headey doing her voice, or am I imagining? Did I get that wrong?
Don't know actually. I've not yet watched it. I will watch it at some point. I haven't yet watched it. And B, I haven't looked at the cast to see who it is. But
I'm pretty sure it is, because I was getting major Cersei vibes off her voice. So I hope it is.
It wouldn't surprise me, obviously, with Kevin Smith behind it. It wouldn't surprise me. Not that there's a connection between the two by any means, but obviously big name producer and everything that would have been able to call in a few favors or attract a few bigger names.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the juxtaposition of BBC radio drama about knife crime through to He-Man.
Masters of the Universe.
Yeah, Masters of the Universe, which is pissing off some nerds. Yeah, because it's weirdly enough, when I was approaching tonight's show, I didn't know necessarily how to kick it off. I didn't have like necessarily a subject in mind. And just before we started tonight, actually, I just remembered like, I know what I've seen in the Discord, the Romancing the Dungeon Discord, is Declan talking about quite a lot. Is like anime. Like you just seem like it's a part of media. I'm very much I'm a huge film fan. Like I probably would have loved your class, by the way. Like if that was a thing, if that had been a thing when I was a kid, or if I'd realised that it was something that I'd be passionate about, God blimey, I would have loved it. But yeah, I thought, you've obviously made a lot of mentions about certain shows. And I'm like, what's that? And you go, oh, it's anime. And I'm like, no idea what that means, because it's just not an area that I've not really found much that.
Okay.
I'm not gonna say appeals to me. That's the wrong word, but that really connects with me. I've seen a couple of films that have been okay, but when it comes to like TV shows, I don't know. There's just something about and broader speaking, like just a lot of Japanese media or Asian media, I should say, just doesn't necessarily, especially that sort of anime, manga, anything like that, just doesn't connect with me. Horrors, I tend to do quite well with it. Asian horrors is particularly good for me. I've seen the occasional drama recently, which is particularly good. Like, oh God, what's the one I saw recently? The Handmaiden. The Handmaiden was fantastic, and I saw The Devil. Saw that recently. That was fantastic, like unreal.
Okay, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's a revenge tale. I mean, if you're into sort of like, if you're into things that I said it's Korean rather than Japanese, but if you're into like revenge films or anything like that, like Old Boy or anything that ilk, it's
Everybody gravitates to Old Boy, and I'm like, oh, it's very good, and I really enjoyed it. Have you watched Sympathy for Lady Vengeance?
of course I have.
Oh, I watch it maybe once a year, and I will have a little cry to myself. Like it's just a stunning piece of film. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the trilogy. Like I think it's a beautiful, beautiful collection. But I don't know what it is. But I always gravitate to Lady Vengeance. So you've Old Boy, Sympathy for I think it's Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, and then you've Sympathy for Lady Vengeance. I do agree with you. My partner is actually from Taiwan. He's from Taipei, and we will sit there and we will watch shows, and he will be laughing. He and I'm like, and I can read the subtitles. That's and I'm like, did I not what where was the like I don't. And then the flip side, he'll watch something that I'm cracking up about, and he's like, what, why this is so bad they have to put in fake laughter, Declan. And I'm just like, no, that was actually quite funny. And he's like, no, it's not, it's awful, it's not funny at all. I don't know. Anime for me is it's a form of media that I really, really we talked about kind of formative years. It was there for me when I was like 11 and 12, and like my gateway to that obviously was the likes of Pokemon, Digimon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and all those things. And then Sci-Fi UK, on Sky Network used to, on Saturday nights at midnight, always have an anime. They would run a feature-length anime film, and my parents, because I wasn't the kid that caused trouble, I was the good kid, I was the quiet one. We're like, yeah, you can stay up late on Saturday. You can watch your weird little Asian cartoons. God, you're a bit of a nerd, aren't you? Not realizing the absolute horrific material I was exposed to age 12 and 13. And yeah, age 12 watching Violence Jack and being like, what? Like, okay, no, and not fully gravitating what was happening. Now my parents, that's just cartoons. He loves his cartoons. He's mad for cartoons. But I've always been drawn to anime in a big way, and I know a lot of people can find it quite difficult to get into, and especially when you're like, oh, there's 600 episodes, to catch up on, but don't worry, you can skip, this part and these episodes because these are all arcs that don't maintain the current storyline. And you're like, okay, I can see why it might not be to everybody's foray, or even everyone's cup of tea, but I've watched, I've watched a lot of TV, I've watched a lot of film, and there's something about an animated piece that just, I don't know if it's a part of my childhood and that like nostalgia element that I've always kept, but that can move me in a way that a film might not move me. And I mean, one of my all-time favorites, and it's on Netflix, and again, not everybody's cup of tea. It's a series, short series. I think it's only like maybe 18 episodes, and again, 25 minutes long. It's a series called Your Lie in April, and it's about a young pianist who, when as a child learning to play the piano, his mother was horrifyingly abusive, strict, and the damage that's done on him and the pressure he feels when he goes to perform and getting it rigidly correct. And he happens to meet a young woman or a young girl who plays the violin and plays it the way she wants to play it, and it's just that kind of clash of their two worlds. And
the classic sassy violinist.
yeah, there's a little bit more, without giving it away for anybody that might want to check it out. There's so much heart in it, because it's not, oh, boy meets girl, girl meets boy, they fall in love, they kiss, then they go away and they make a wonderful orchestra. There's the show touches on some really really heavy things, and at the time in my own life, I was going through some a very rough patch, and I remember, I'll watch a bit of anime. Anime always was like a comfort, and I picked this one, and I was so broken after watching it, and Nate, I mean ugly cry, like
Wow.
can't breathe. There's a pain in your throat. You're covered in snots, and someone the person that you're living with thinks that there's someone might have died. You're that kind of like broken by it, and I was going through a particularly hard time with my own mental health, and I'd had a bit of a look. I'll call it what it was. I had a bit of a breakdown, and it was such. I remember that day so vividly. Uh, it was a couple of years ago, and I've since come through it, and I sought help, and I went to a therapist, and that was great. But it's the anime I always remember. It's that show that I don't remember what the counselor told me and how to achieve. I remember that anime and the spirit. Like just the I don't know. I remember it helped me kind of get through that. I think it was nearly 5 or 6 days where I just couldn't do anything else. I couldn't get out of the bed and didn't want to shower, and I didn't want to. I was still wearing the same clothes I climbed into the bed in. And I remember watching it and just being able to cry and actually like get upset and have a feeling for something was like, oh, okay, you're not totally dead on the inside yet. Let's work on maybe getting a fix. And a lot of anime I watch, whether it's action or comedy and stuff like that, I've got a lot of positive memories around a lot of those shows. So uh, I do kind of hold a place in my heart for that, for those shows and that particular genre. I think, what did I watch most? Oh, I watched a film. It's on Netflix. Words bubble up like soda pop, I think is what it's called. It's very cute. The style, the animation style is gorgeous. It's like it's just a feast for the eyes. Like it's just pops of brilliant color with kind of fairly washed, like almost kind of watercolor washed characters. It's very dainty. Kind of the scenery around them is just magnificent, and the story is very cute. The story, it's not gonna, it's not gonna break the world or anything, but the story is very, very sweet.
Yeah, no, I mean, some of it. Don't get me wrong. Like when I'm sitting here and saying it's just not for me. It's not like I'm necessarily hating it. There's just nothing. There's just never. There's not been much that I've literally picked up, watched, or tried to watch, and I've gone, yeah, I want to stick with this. The occasional thing has stuck out. I mean, it's been a while since I've tried many films. I mean, I watched Your Name recently, a couple of months ago, a
Yeah.
few months ago, and that was fantastic. And you told about beautiful. I remember sitting through the first 5 minutes or something. I'm just like, wow, this is stunningly beautiful.
Yeah.
And that was very enjoyable. I enjoyed that. And I remember years ago watching some of the other stuff. Like I think I watched Appleseed or something like that. I think it was
Yes.
called like a
Yeah.
mech thing.
Next one.
I enjoyed that. I've watched like the classics like Akira and Ghost in the Shell. They're okay. Like I don't necessarily get the love for them. I can sit through them and enjoy them certainly.
Yeah.
But I think it's series that tend to be a bit tougher for me. The longer form story, it just struggles to really engage me. But I can understand why people like it because it's clearly got a huge market outside of Japan and Asia. It's not like it's just like you saying about your partner watching things. You can understand the cultural differences. You can understand
Yeah.
when someone sees a joke or someone sees something that doesn't necessarily connect with somebody who's not been brought up in that culture necessarily. But clearly there is something there because you're not alone. There's obviously a lot of Western society that loves anime, manga, anything like that, and it's just, yeah. But like you said, the same with your class. Not everything connects with everyone. Not everything. Not everyone's going to get everything. But yeah, I do wish because it's a big hole in my sort of comfort zone, shall we say? That I just
But I'm the same. Like, I even like. I know because I know you guys were tweeting out. I think they were score predictions for. It wasn't the World
yeah.
Cup. It was the Euros. Was it?
That was your yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I I don't gravitate to sport. I just I often kind of go, how can someone sit there and watch that for 90 minutes or 2 hours? And I'm like, you watched an obscure cartoon about a fox, that wants to be a tuna fish, or whatever it is. There, there's boxes for everybody, Declan. And that's the thing I always remind myself. A friend of mine brought me to my first, and I mean, I come from the west of Ireland. I come from rural Ireland. I'd never been to a football match, as in like Irish football, Gaelic football.
Yeah,
Uh, I was made play it as a kid. Never actually played on the team. Never went to any of the school team things. And a friend of mine brought me to one about 3 years ago, and I had a blast. She tells the story very differently, Nate. So don't go following up with her at all. Like she tells that story very. I thought it was wonderful. Would I go back again? No. It's I'm happy that there I recognize that I don't fully grasp it, and it's not my cup of tea, but I get why people get so passionate about it, and I get why people get so involved in it. I just wish that, because, and again, there's both sides. There's people in my hobbies that look at other hobbies and go, no, how do you do that? But I often feel like a lot of like what I do and I enjoy is looked down on, and like, oh, that's so childish, that's so whatever. It's like, mate, you're not out on the actual pitch kicking the ball, you're watching them. So I'm not making the art. I'm just appreciating it in the same way you're appreciating the skill of that football player or other sports player. I don't know.
but Declan, lads, drinking, oi, come on. Nah, but it's. I would say, I mean, on that point, and I totally agree. And this is certainly not to try and convince you or anybody else at home, but I do think, let's taking sport as an example, right? I think 99.9% of your exposure to sport will be the news, TV, etc., etc. I think going to a live game is different because you do, as long as the game's interesting as well, and the crowd's up for it, you get swept up in that whole thing. And I'd imagine a lot of us could be taken to an event that isn't our cup of tea. Realistically, football is the only sport that I have any interest in, particularly. Like I keep a casual interest in a couple of others, but not to the point that I watch them or care about them. Rugby's one I have no interest in whatsoever. But if someone said, "Do you want to go to Twickenham for an England game and watch it live?" I'm sure being there in that environment, I'd get swept up in it. But I think that's the same, not just with sports. I think that's the same with everything. I've been to, I've been to comedy shows with comedians that I've not necessarily been high up my list of people I want to see, and enjoyed it. I've been to musicals. I went to see Mamma Mia. I have no interest in Mamma Mia. I had no interest before. I have no interest after. I enjoyed sitting there watching Mamma Mia in the audience. It was fun being there live, seeing something performed. And I think there's a lot to be said about seeing things performed live compared to just watching something on TV, which is passive. You might be distracted. It's not the same. It's not interesting. You've got the noise of the crowd in with sport in particular. You've got the noise
There's still
of
a
the crowd.
disconnect. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not the same. And I think it's the same with. I'm going to use this actually. I'm going to use this as a segue to move into TTRPG conversations.
Okay.
Because I think it is very similar to what we do. I've got friends that are not into Dungeons and Dragons or any of that. Very much what you would call cool people. There were speech marks there for everyone that didn't realise that I'm talking about people that think they're cool but they're not. But I don't doubt for a second if I could tie them down and get them to play for an evening, they'd enjoy themselves. And it's the same mentality. It's not live sport, and it's a lot more participative than it is going to watch a sport game or a sport game. Bloody hell! But a sport game. Let's go and watch a sport game, everyone. But going and watching an event that you're not necessarily interested in is a lot more participative. But I still think there is an element of, if you just give it a go, you're more likely to be. Now, whether they'd enjoy it enough to carry on with it and play and want to actively be a part of that. The same with you going to Gaelic football. You enjoyed it. You enjoyed that moment, but it doesn't mean that you're suddenly a football fan. By the way, on that point, my wife only this week discovered that Gaelic football even existed. We was watching normal people. One of the characters in there played it at school. She said, "Oh, he's playing rugby." I was like, "No, that's not. That's Gaelic football." Yeah, so she never even knew it existed. But yeah, I think there's people that would enjoy it. Right, TTRPG.
Okay.
what's your experience with TTRPG? How did you get into the tabletop role playing game arena?
So, have to go back a few years. Like my first sort of like toe dipped in the chaotic ocean of TTRPGs was online forums, and play by posting, where you would take on the role of a character and you were in and stuff like that. Oh yeah, I'm talking old school. I'm talking old school now. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great fun. But a lot of work. And then because like again, I was that kid in a small town in the west of Ireland that was was definitely gay, and was a bit of a nerd, and didn't really have a lot of friends, and watched Japanese cartoons, and never got in trouble in school, and spent his weekends playing the Nintendo 64 and the GameCube, and not going out and drinking.
One of the cool kids is what I would
Yes,
call
I
that.
was a cool kid. Thank you. And I think that's why I kind of gravitated to the like a lot of people in the TCRP community, and even the younger generation coming up. The internet has been like a big first step into it. After that, then it was college, and didn't really get into it until kind of maybe the latter half of my first year in university, and got invited to play at a table using the GURPS system, and it was a fantasy game, and created like an 18-year-old girl who was partially blind and cast magic. She was an air mage, and um, went hell for leather with it. Absolutely fell in love with it. Played that campaign for 2 years, and I was like, "Oh, this is really fun. I might give it a go, creating my own stories." And that was 17, almost 18 years ago. And in that time, I have been a near constant DM, and absolutely love it. I love playing. It's great to be a player. It's great to jump into stuff. If you're listening to this and you think, "Oh, he sounds like he might be a fun guest," ask me. I love making up characters in different worlds and doing stuff. That's great crack. But I have a particular passion for creating worlds and creating characters and drawing up stories, and weaving in subtext and subplots the whole way through it, just to challenge myself. I absolutely adore that element. It's such a creative space. People I don't think people give it near enough credit for the work that goes into a tabletop role playing game. The creation of it, obviously, and then the running of it and the playing of it. Huge. It's such a drain on a good drain, obviously. Nearly always a good drain. It's such a, I don't know why anyone does it, Nate. Why do we do it? No, it's a big drain on energy and time. But it's it's that good kind of drain where you're kind of recharged. When you put so much into it, most of the time failing, the odd bout of imposter syndrome, you get something back out of it. Whether it's a funny story to tell, a couple of weeks later, slagging somebody off for a nat 20, a triple six on a GURP system or whatever it might be, or a critical fail in Vampire the Masquerade, or whatever it is. It's one of my favorite elements of tabletop role playing games is you never describe, oh yeah, it was me and Louise and John sitting in a room, on Discord, and Nate played this character and Louise played that character. You tell what happened to the characters as if it actually happened, because in your own head, that's the shared experience. That's the created experience that the five of us did. And you remember those events. You don't remember what you were wearing at the table. You don't remember if you had a full cup of coffee or half a packet of crisps or whatever it was. You remember what your character was doing and what was said. And I still go back to stuff, some great memories and moments that I got to share with players and I got to share with GMs where, oh, you remember when we did this, and you go through the whole story. You know, it's like meeting your mates down the pub and you're like, so anything new? No, but you remember that time, you know, we all so we ended up drunk in Amsterdam. And you're like, yeah, and you relive those moments. I love that with tabletop role playing games. It's one of my favorite things.
It's very. I think it helps because it's. This is not rocket science, but it's obviously it's collaborative. So yes, you're a DM who comes to the table, and you're the only person at the table that knows where you're heading within reason, because obviously players can derail you and change things. The dice can change things, you know, all these things. But you're the only person that knows where the end is, so to speak, and hopefully a rough path of how you're going to get there.
A very rough path.
A very rough path, of course. But it is, like I said, it's collaborative, because you can start that session and say, right, last time, at the end of the last session, you were sitting in this tavern, you'd just been told that you need to go and fight this dragon. Brilliant. Couldn't think of anything more interesting in Dungeons and Dragons than the actual thing in the title.
At a sport game.
Yeah, this dragon that's down in the dungeon, you need to fight that. And then it's just that it's then up to them. It's you've thrown this in, and the thing is, to some degree, you're coming to the table prepared. You sort of understand what you think might happen that evening because of that rough path. You've thrown that at them, and you've got 4 or 5 people around the table who don't know that, and they are just on the spot trying to think, right, what do I do next? What do I do next? And I think a lot of credit is given to DMs for the hard. You know, it's a very hard job DMing. I know you said that you're a forever DM and whatnot. It's a very hard job for many reasons, but I do appreciate. I remember the first time I played, and realised actually I've always thought it's easy to play, and it isn't, because on the player's side, you've got to think on like I say, on the spot, try and think of, right, what's the next move. And sometimes I've been in that moment, and I've seen other players in that moment. You get to a point where you don't know what to do. Like, you've just exhausted every option, and you sort of go, I'm just stuck. I don't know what to do. It might be a room, it might be a conversation you're having. You might be looking for clues in role playing, and you get to a point you go, I just don't know. There's literally nothing else for me to do. It even happened to some degree in the one shot that you had me on, like when Amber and I were talking to can't remember her name, but the woman who owned the motel, who ran away from us, and we found the secret room. And there was a point where we were questioning her, and then I was like, I don't feel like we're getting anything out of this. There's no information here, and I'm just at a loss. And I think I even sort of say, well, I think that's everything. And then 2 minutes later, I go, oh, just one more question, because suddenly something pinged in my mind. I thought, oh, I haven't asked that yet. And it's frustrating. So I do think players deserve actually a lot of credit for driving the story forward. What we do as DMs with it is then difficult potentially, but
well, you are right though, because it like there's that collaboration there is that's fundamental in any tabletop role playing game, and whether that's a game where you're all heavily invested in the numbers and building strong characters and doing things really crunchy, and that's your thing. Well, you and your table are all collaborating in that game, in that campaign, in that adventure, in that one shot, whatever it might be. Same goes for a room where the table is very heavily invested in the storytelling arc, or even a combination of two, whatever it might be. The players, like you were saying, mate, bring the unpredictability. You have your path. You have your, it's cobbled together, and there, part of it might be, now in a sinkhole, but you have a path to, this is where we're starting, and we start in the tavern, and we're going to the dungeon. Okay, that's A to Z. Well, what you don't count on is, that random obscure character you pull together, as the barman or barmaid or whatever it was, or the performer in the corner, is the thing that all the players kind of gravitate towards, and they really want to know what that person's story is. And that's where the collaboration comes into it. And it's that, like, oh, okay. And then you also have the unpredictability of the dice rolls. Like, if you hedge something on a dice roll and it goes great, wonderful, great, you do what you want to do. But if it goes wrong, the failure is just as important to that story as it is the success, whether it was a nat or a high success, whatever it was. The failure can lead to some really great moments, and as a DM, you're relying on your players to be in that moment and to give us just as much energy as you are to the storytelling facet of it. That's the crux. I think that's the secret that everybody needs to remember. Everybody knows it, but it's just remembering we're all doing the same thing. My job is to kind of, keep some sort of reins on it. Not a tight leash or anything, but some sort of control, and the players are there to fill in the blanks of how we started at A and how we got to Z. And by the time we get to Z, the dragon might be dead, but what's replaced it is a small army of kobolds hoarding its treasure in the hopes that they might be able to melt it all and create a gold dragon or whatever. Whatever. The GM figures that stuff out. The players just get you through all of it. That's the fun part. I think anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I think where I was going with this was like, and I guess you get it in other things, but I think why I enjoy it is just how collaborative it is in terms of. Now you can play any board games and get that same feeling, but I don't know. There's just something about TTR because it's mainly I was going to say intelligence is the wrong word. Imagination. It just means you've got to be a little bit more. There's just a lot more just different things that you don't necessarily get in other board games. Yeah, you do get in some, but it's just you're all creating something that isn't there. There's nothing there, and you're just all trying to get that same story that works for 6 people around a table or 5 people around the table to enjoy, to understand, to make sense. And I love the failure part of it. I love the. I was going to say darkness. I think that's probably a bit too strong, but I love that it doesn't out. Listen, everyone's entitled to play their game how they want to, and I'm sure there's lots of people out there that want a D&D game that is lovely, fluffy, sort of happy, no darkness to it whatsoever, no down to it whatsoever. But I like that flaw. I'm very much. I love an anti-hero. I love a flawed hero. I love all that sort of stuff, and so I want stories where there's failure. Now, I don't want. I've said this time and time again on the show. I don't want my clients. Brilliant. I don't want my players or their characters.
How much are they paying you, Nate?
Yeah, not enough. We had this conversation this week. Sam tried to say he was going to start charging me for the artwork he does for the thing, and I said, okay, I'll start charging for my DM work then, and see how far that goes. But I don't want any of their characters to die per se. But even if they do, that becomes a moment in the story. It becomes something that potentially affects those characters and changes how they react going forward. Even if it makes them more cautious in battle, or maybe it makes them miss their fallen brethren, whatever it might be. And it becomes, ultimately, it's a story. And it's brutal, and I wouldn't want it to happen. But equally, if it did happen, we'd have to find a way of making it interesting. Obviously, especially given we're doing podcasts, you and I, you obviously want to make it mean something.
Yes,
because it could happen. It could happen at any time. We all sort of think this character's going to die because Big Bad comes along, but equally they could die at the hands of 6 goblins that just get the upper hand on them and roll well.
Or a couple of botched rolls as they try to cross a river, whatever it might be. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but you want it to matter. You want it to be a big moment in whatever, however it might fall in the story. One thing I haven't said in this whole thing, I've probably said it right at the beginning of the intro. Romancing the Dungeon is obviously where I know you from originally. Fantastic little podcast, but I want you to describe the podcast. Now, I don't know if I remember to tell you to bring a D6 and a D20. If I didn't, I've got one here. I can do it for you.
No, you did.
Okay, right. If you've listened to the show before, you are a DM. You have got a charisma modifier of +4. Therefore, I want you to roll your D20, add 4, and that is how many words you've got to initially describe Romancing the Dungeon.
Oh my, okay. 16.
Oh. Is that including the 4?
Yes, that's including the 4. Okay.
You don't have to use all 16. If you can do it in 5, do it in 5. But 16 is your 16 is your limit, and I am counting. I've got the fingers ready.
Romancing the Dungeon is a soft core D&D adventure about 4 heroes looking for love.
Yep, I think that's about right.
There we go. We can hyphenate some of those words.
Yeah, that's fine. well, it was about 16. It might have been over. It might have been less. It doesn't matter. Lovely. That might be the most, and that's probably the highest roll we've had, and the most comprehensive answer we've had, and the most probably on form or on the nose description, because that is pretty much how you probably. That's probably your bio on Twitter. That's probably word for
I only
word.
learned. I dubbed us a softcore D&D podcast, okay? And I dubbed us softcore D&D, meaning, we're not, if you're looking for the big rules and you're looking for the mechanics, you're not going to find it in the show. Like we cut out a lot of the discussion around the mechanic of, because we want the story. We build ourselves a bit like a radio drama. We're here for the story, character interaction, narration, music effects, immersion. So a lot of the rule discussion, debate, whatever you want to call it, and explanations, because some things will come up and I'm like, oh, actually, can we pause and have a look at that and define it and figure it out and what does it fully mean, and then we'll proceed. That gets cut from the episode, obviously, because that's just not our show. So I dubbed us softcore D&D. Last Friday, so well over a year that we're into kind of maybe 18 months, 19 months territory for the show. Someone pointed out that softcore also refers to pornography.
You knew that.
No. If I say softcore, I don't necessarily go to porn. So wait, that came out wrong too. But someone pointed it out, like, oh, I almost didn't listen to you guys because it says softcore in the title, and I was like, why? Like, I thought it was gonna be a lot of like sexy time in the show. I'm like, we are so far removed. I think we've had maybe like 4 or 5 kisses in the entire first season, and that's it. There was a hint towards the end of the last episode that 2 characters hooked up, but we did that classic 90s Hallmark Channel pan to the fireplace moment, and the camera faded to black, and we left it at that. So that was blissfully pointed out to me, and I was like, oh, okay, well, it's stuck now. Like, I can't say Romancing the Dungeon is a D&D podcast, because it's not. It's a softcore D&D podcast. And I think my favorite thing about that now is, if you stay listening, if that doesn't put you off, I think we have you. I think you'll like the show. I think that draws a certain mindset that kind of is very similar or close in spirit to my own. So I'm quite happy to be a softcore D&D podcast. Wait for the day I do a hardcore one.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is what I was going to say. So I think before I listened to you, I think I probably didn't go in expecting it to be quite. I don't know why this phrase makes me feel weird. A sexy podcast. I didn't go in expecting it to be like that, but I think because of the name, obviously, I knew romance and love and relationships were obviously going to be a key part of it, and obviously then throw in the word softcore. You go, okay, maybe there might be some smooching, some over the shirt action, but I think also, the other reason I thought it might be involved is because I've seen other accounts which are okay. I don't think they would necessarily describe them as hardcore, but certainly give off the impression that they are. I can't think of the word. Sexually positive, I guess. That there obviously is a lot more. Yeah. So they probably do go into that probably a lot more. It might not be the key element of their show, but they probably explore it as part of their show. And so because I'd seen that sort of show, or I'd not listened to it necessarily, but I'd seen shows pitching themselves like that, and then I saw yours going softcore. I just got, okay, this is obviously a little niche of the D&D podcast market, romance and obviously there's So I probably had the same impression before I went into your show. Doesn't matter either way. I don't care if it was there or not. It's just interesting that you didn't realise that this long into your, because it probably says more about me than it does you. As soon as someone says the word softcore, the next word is porn. Like, it's not certainly not Dungeons and Dragons.
See, I just think I'm very innocent. That's all that is. I'm just a very innocent little man. So there's that. If you can get the bullshit off that response, then you can read me like a book. I I gotta say, I tend to be quite self depreciative, about a lot. I think a lot of us do. I think it's a lovely, it's an awful trait, but it's a very common trait between people from Ireland and people from the United Kingdom. We tend to downplay a lot of what we do, for fear that people would think, we're proud of ourselves. God forbid. I love our little show. I am so proud of it. I'm so we're recording again on the 7th of August, and I have literally been looking forward to that day since the last time we got to record, which is nearly 3 weeks ago. And I've kind of had in my head, it's the 7th, it's the 7th, it's the 7th, is it almost the 7th? It's like Christmas. Because the way we approach the show, it's the same as ourselves. We're friends first. We all have a fantastic relationship outside of the podcast. We talk nearly every day. It's random memes, it's in jokes, it's a little bit of hazing towards poor Louise slash Fia, and all in kind of good spirit. And don't worry, she gives it back just as well. But we've always maintained that the day it stops being fun, the day the podcast stops being fun for us, is the day we're done. And we're going into season 2. We're still having fun, and we recorded 5, possibly 6 episodes the last time we got together, and they were phenomenal. And that's nearly 8 months of a break between the last recording of season 1 and the first recordings for season 2. So with 8 months of a gap, we went in, and it was obviously there's COVID and all that stuff we're dealing with, but we knew we were taking that much time off between the 2 seasons. We all needed a bit of a break. The show deals with some fairly heavy themes. There's been light moments, and there's been silly moments and comedic moments, but there's been our fair share of heartache and kind of emotionally wrenching things that have happened, and darker moments. So there's a nice little kind of counterpoints between both. But we took some time off, and we focused on getting the show out there for everybody else and engaging with other people like yourselves. And we got back to the table about 3 weeks ago, and it was like only a couple of days had passed since we last recorded, and we were all just hyper to get back into it. And it was fantastic. It was such a blast.
So I've given you your 16 words, but what is your story about? Actually, no, before we do that, I just wanted to say, just coming back to your point about your show and how it deals with heavy themes and everything. So I haven't listened. I'll completely own up to this. I haven't listened to the full first season. I think I listened to about the first 5 episodes, and I listened to the last. It would have been more than 5. It was about the time you asked me to come on. I started listening from there onward. So there was a few weeks towards the end of the series.
Yeah.
So obviously I missed a lot of the context. But what I will say is, and I think I said this to you at the time, was listening to your first few episodes, lovely, light and breezy. Got to those that second chunk of episodes toward the end, I'm like, some dark shit going on here. This is there's some serious role playing going on here, which is very much what happened between the two. So I am keen to get back to listen to the whole series and find out what happened in between. I was very impressed and loved what I heard towards the end, and genuinely I'm itching to get that season 2. Because I loved coming on and doing the one shot, and that was a great experience for me. You going on about your imposter syndrome as a DM, you need to shut the hell up, my good friend, because you're and I'm not just saying that, you are a fantastic DM. I would, anyone wants to know how to do it. The guy he's so charismatic. He knows what he's talking about, whether or not he says he does or not. He knows what he's talking about, and I don't think there was a moment where he looked stumped. And bearing in mind, we threw some stupid crap at him. He just rolled with it. He absolutely rolled with it, and he's a fantastic DM. So please do check him out on Romance in the Dungeon. With that all said, just give the listeners an idea of what is the overarching story of the first season.
So because I do think you hit the you started well. It starts with that atypical let's meet in a tavern, but our heroes, so Festa, Fia, Nate, and Thane, all kind of already know each other or know of each other. So it's not four strangers lumped together. They're all on a job. They've been brought together by Thane. There's a local priest who needs help finding a lost amulet, and we learn very quickly in those first 2 or 3 episodes that, oh, hang on a second, Hephaestus used to date Nate. Nate now pretends he doesn't know her. He ghosted her. Fia has a weird obsession with like love in her own way, and Thane is this sort of distant, cold shoulder. We're here for the job. And what transpires is not only was the job a lie, was the priest kind of giving them a big ruse. The priest has in fact resurrected an old one, an old god, and she is now possessing his housekeeper. And the gang inadvertently free her of the possession and find themselves at the hands of a rather wrathful Hedana, the goddess of love, lust, and life, and are because of their encounter, they now kind of find themselves, at a loss as to what's actually happening. What does it all really mean? And what transpires is the bard Nathaniel has married the heiress to a huge fortune, Eugenia Flatstone, and she's been kidnapped. So Eugenia had come to the village to meet Nate. They'd been exchanging letters back and forth. She had catfished him, pretending to be a much younger, much more of Nate's type. But through the effects of some very, very potent love potions, Nate falls for Eugenia's charms, and the two marry. And they then go on an adventure to find who's taking Eugenia, and it leads them to learn a couple of lessons about themselves, and their relationships, and how their actions and their words impact themselves and those closest to them. And we fight monsters, and we do all these things in the middle of it. But again, and I know I am not comparing myself to Matt Mercer and Critical Role, but I know a lot of people go, oh, it's all scripted, it's all pre-sorted and pre-arranged, it's all pre-produced. Nate only married Eugenia Flatstone on a dice roll. The whole story would have gone in a completely different direction if not for that dice roll way back in episode 2. I have utterly enjoyed every moment of it, and getting like you said earlier on, Nate, you as a DM, you start with this is the starting point, and they're going to go in this direction in some shape or form. And I knew that regardless of what happens with Eugenia and Nate, she was going to be a thing at the end. She was going to be an integral character to that main plot. How much of it the characters and the players went for was up to them. They heard money and riches, and they found themselves quickly embroiled in a big conspiracy and all this stuff. Had they gone in another direction and spent, the season exploring Hedana and the old ones and the marks, they would know a lot more about the gods, the old gods, and how they might remove it, or how they didn't. They chose not to. So we ended season 1 with, sorry, what is that mark? Like, what does it actually do? And I don't even know if we'll get it. Like, I hope to flesh it out a little bit more in season 2. I'm super excited for season 2 because, and I think, I think it wasn't. I can't say it was by accident, but it wasn't by my grand design. But season 1 is very much about the importance of self-love, and coming to understand that you are not a perfect being. You're not player 1 in this story of life. We're all player 1. We're all just trying to do our thing and get through it, and experience it and love it and hate it and so on and so forth. And the important thing is to take stock of who you are as a person and recognize that there are parts of yourself that are not bubbly and light and wonderful. That there are thoughts and there are feelings in you that are real. You know, whether you bottle them up, whether you push them down, whether you release them, whatever you're doing, them, recognizing that they're there is important, and we see that manifesting. We feel and we talked about this before the end of season 1, and certainly now heading into season 2, we kind of feel like we grew up. You know, around episode 5 and 6, it was like, this can be something else. This doesn't have to be, you know, little jokes about, you know, penises and boobs and, you know, and sex and what. Oh, you know, we can have fun and we can have silly. I mean, for the love of God, we have a kobold who, you know, is a connoisseur and purveyor of jams, preserves, and conserves, but never chutneys. Called Jim Jam Flim Flam. And if you buy his extraordinarily expensive, it shows you how bad I am at money. If you buy his extraordinarily expensive jam, which has its own side effect, by the way, you get a dip in his lucky dip sack, all of which contain random, you know, you might get, most time you get nothing, but all the weapons are ridiculously, you know, named. They're like, it's like if Austin Powers got the chance to name the weapons in D&D. So we had Nate pulled the just the tip whip, and Fia pulled the oh yeah harder ring, which is a ring of the ram, and that's where that ring came from. She pulled it from Jim Jam Flim Flam's Lucky Jim Sack in episode 17. So we you know we cherish those kind of fun moments and those lighter moments. That same episode has probably one of my all-time favorite role-playing moments. And I wasn't even role playing. It was between Hephaestus and Nate, Amber and Sam, and they had just had a very difficult encounter. They barely survived, and all their baggage was just thrown out in front of Thane and Fia by this twisted night hag who knew she wasn't going to win physically in the fight. So screw it, I'm going to go for the emotional damage and see if I can make them hate each other and fight each other. And the two of them, again, with a conversation, knowing that this is where this needs to go. We can't keep just doing this little back and forth. There needs to be something here, and we need to talk about those lines. And you know, if this argument gets too heavy or gets too difficult or starts to feel a little too personal, let's draw our lines so we know. But I sat there, and it's that moment where you're in the pub and your two best friends are having a huge fight, and you want to help and you want to step in, but you know you're only going to make it worse, and this needs to play out. And I remember at one stage looking across the table, and Louise was doing the same thing I was doing, which was like, you know, hands over the eyes and the head kind of bowed, and you're listening, and you're you know, you don't want to watch it, but they just jumped all this stuff out on the table, which was phenomenal. Like I remember being like, wow, we started with, you know, Hephaestus, you know, doing a coyote ugly in that bar in episode 1, and here she is calling out this asshole who treated her like garbage, and he's trying to defend himself, and he's trying to explain why. And it was just very real, and I know that's not for everybody. I know people want to, you know, go off and fight the, you know, the undead horde, or, you know, the lich or a dragon or whatever it is, and there are amazing podcasts out there that do that stuff, and we just like to tell stories, and we just like to create moments and characters that you might listen to and go, God, that's, you know, that reminds me of my friend, or that reminds me of something like this, or oh, that was difficult, or that wasn't easy. And yeah, you know, there is that joke about, you know, D&D being, you know, like therapy and stuff like that. I know that gets bandied around a little bit, and it came up in a discussion I was in the weekend just gone by, but I do think, you know, when you come to a tabletop role playing game, and if it's a story and narrative and characters are the focus, the crux of this, that the role playing element of the game, the role playing aspect of TTRPGs is the focus for that DM and those players. You get an opportunity to put a little bit of yourself into the story and the character. And there's a line there that, willing to acknowledge that sometimes something will not go the way for your character. Things are, and we play these games for escapism. We play them to kind of, get away from the everyday, bustle. But sometimes it can be nice and kind of cathartic to, take the feelings that we didn't maybe get to express that day or that week or whatever it was, and channel them into our character and let that character work through some stuff with us, not for us, but with us. I think is important because you are that character, but that character isn't you. If that makes sense, I don't know. I don't know if it does or doesn't, but that's always been kind of my approach to it. The show came out of the fact that I ended a 10-year relationship at my wedding, so that's what really kind of inspired the thing from the start. So
I was going to ask where the concept of a self-love relationship themed show podcast. I mean, is that how you've got your other is your historically your other games that you've run have they been that type of thing, or is this sort of quite unique to this story?
So I've never done the kind of the romantic element before. Like it was something that I've played flirty cards and I've do on so on and so forth. But my games I tend to focus on role playing, like in that side of it. And again, if you're coming to my table, that's something you should know in a big way. If you wanna fudge dice rolls, if you wanna talk mechanics, I mean I can do that, and I just don't enjoy it the same way other people do. I love and I always bring it to my games. I love the drama, Nate. I'll just call it what it is. I love the um and it is I love the comedy. It's performance. There's a performative element to what we're doing, and that is very very addictive. Like it's very very addictive, especially when it's all going well. And everybody's having fun and everybody's enjoying themselves.
Not so much when it doesn't go well.
No, God, no.
Yeah, but yeah, no, yeah, I don't know what kind of DM I am, I guess, or player. Like I like both sides, I guess. I mean, ultimately, the, the the rules and the roll of the dice is very key to everything that happens, or maybe not key to everything, but it's key to a lot of decisions. And whether, like you said there, the wedding itself only happened because of the roll of the dice.
Yeah.
And it's great when you get a critical hit at the right time, or a critical failure at the wrong time. It's but I don't think anyone's ever going to go back and go, "Oh, do you remember that time I rolled?" Like, yeah, you might occasionally remember the very very good ones, but it's not like, do you remember that I rolled 20 that time that I was doing a check on whatever.
Yeah.
But you are going to remember the moments, like you said there, that the whole thing about that conversation where they were like just dumping everything out there because it's just a big thing. And
Yeah.
I would say that's the one thing ours misses. Ours has got a lot of stupid humor and some decent role playing, but we don't have that much serious, like I think stories need a bit of everything. I mean, obviously it depends. Some stories just need one thing and that's enough. But I tend to feel like with the type of things we do, you need the levity to break it up, but you also need some serious moments to appreciate the good times, and we haven't hit that. But like I say, that's what I loved, having that comparison with you of going, okay, this is the type of podcast they are. I just assumed that the last few episodes are the same. Oh no, it's entirely different. So it's good to have both of those things, and even within that, there was still comedy, and even within that, there was still good moments and fun as well. It's not like it just goes completely dark and gritty, and it's a completely different podcast. It's just that, as you probably said there, it is at some point you've learned how to tell those stories in a different way. But equally, it's not just that. It's also those. At the start, you are going to be probably a little bit more lighthearted because you're just getting to know the characters. You don't want anything too heavy, too serious, straight up. But then it's obviously as those things interject and other things come into play, other storylines that you yourself as a DM has created, those start to impact those players and they start to develop, hopefully. and starts to impact their decisions and their reactions with the rest of their team, the party. Yeah, I like a bit of everything. I like the rules. I like the game of it, but I think the role playing side of things is what keeps me coming back, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
because I think
I,
like it's my thing, with the established adventures that come with the likes of Dungeons and Dragons. The Lost Mines of Phandelver, Rhyme with Frostmaiden, Curse of Strahd.
yeah,
You and I could sit there and both run Curse of Strahd at the exact same time on a Tuesday at 7 o'clock for 3 hours, different tables, or even the same table. We might alternate back and forth. The way you approach the game and the way I approach the game, even if we both like the role playing side of it and we're okay with the crunchy stuff, we're going to end up with very different stories. We're going to that's the because your approach is what makes it makes it your game. How you want to tell that story makes it your game. It's how you want to tell the story. That's all that matters, and that the players are willing and able and interested in helping you do that. That's the crucial thing.
it's interesting you say that, actually, because we had a very brief conversation a couple of months ago. I had a hissy fit and said I'm giving up on DM. I'm giving up on D&D. It's not for me. We had a number of things that had gone wrong, and all in the same time. It all just knocked on my head, and I was just didn't want to play. And one of those things actually didn't happen that day. It actually happened a week or so before, but it'd been knocking around in the old noggin and just hadn't disappeared. And I'm in a Facebook group for Storm King Thunder DMs. So if I've got any questions, I can fire it off and see how people feel about certain things. Which is a great resource, but equally you get some people who are very confident and/or very dismissive of playing it other ways. Basically, someone in there posted something that said something along the lines of, "Oh, we've just completed Storm King Thunder on session whatever number it was, or it took us a year, or it took us 2 years." They basically said how long it had taken them to complete Storm King Thunder, and I just commented saying, "I really need to understand how you people do this, because we're at session 16 or whatever it was at the time. We're at session 16, and we're still in chapter 1." And someone commented and said, "How on earth do you make it interesting if that's how slow it's taking you?" And I don't think they meant it horribly. I don't actually think that they were being dismissive or that they were attacking me or anything like that. But it then just goes, imposter syndrome. Oh, is this boring? And obviously, when you throw in the fact that we have podcasts as well, it's not just I've not just got to worry about, do the 5 people around my table find it interesting. I have to sort of worry about, is this going to be interesting for people to listen to somewhere down the line? I don't tend to think about it. I don't tend to worry about who's listening to it and whether they listen to it or not. Worst case scenario, we stop getting listeners, we crash and burn, people don't listen, we decide not to do the podcast, and we just carry on playing the game on our own. Absolute worst that happens. But yeah, so it's that point that you were saying there about, and I've said this, I've referenced this before, that you can play exactly this, and I love this about D&D. You can play exactly the same game, or two groups can play exactly the same story, especially if it's a pre-made module, and just have wildly different results. And sometimes it could be how they role play it. Sometimes it could just be because of this little thing, this little dice that just completely changes just as simple as opening a door. Just as simple as something that doesn't seem like a big moment. It doesn't have to be, oh shit, I got killed by the giants. It could just literally be, this door over here will lead you through this cavern much easier and quicker, and you avoid a load of zombies or whatever. Or it might give you, you might get in there and you might find a magic weapon that helps you. Or it could be just something as simple as that could literally change the entire context of the rest of the game.
Yep.
And I love that about it, because we're playing Storm King Thunder. Thousands, if not millions, of people have played this before in a completely different way.
Yeah.
And then you go, that's that, and then you go to you guys, completely new story, completely homebrew story. There's literally no one that's playing your game. There's literally you've got a story that no one else can or probably will be able to, unless someone's sitting there very nerdily taking down notes of everything that happens. No one will literally ever play your game again, and that's what I love about D&D. It's just so expansive, and it's just so, there's so much you can do with it, and just take it and reskin it. Like one of the cool guys that I was talking about earlier, he is a very much a sport person, and I've tried to entice him into playing by thinking, can I take D&D and skin it for football? Like, can I make it about football gangs that fight? Can I make it about that sort of thing? Like, do I want to put in that level of effort for a guy who doesn't necessarily want to play? I don't know, but at the same time, you can take. It doesn't have to be literally Dungeons and Dragons. You can literally just take the stats. You can take the rules. You can take the mechanics, and just apply it to a real world situation if you really, really wanted to. And there's plenty of people that do that.
I think what gave me, or what I felt like gave me license, because like I said, I had my own personal inspiration story and reasons for kicking it off, but I was very apprehensive, and I remember talking to a friend of mine about it, and she was very supportive. She's was a DM that I got to learn a lot from in college, and she's phenomenal, like an excellent dungeon master. But I was running it by her, and we were kind of talking about stuff, and she was like, "You put me on to Dungeons and Daddies, that podcast, and that's about four players playing dads in D&D, in the Forgotten Realms, looking for their sons. And you're telling me you want to take your game, you want to add the D&D system, and you want to tell a story about people trying to understand what love is. Like, why are you not giving yourself permission or the license to do that when you're such a big fan of Dungeons and Daddies and what they do and how they tell?" And that was it. That was the thing that went to my head. If those guys can do it, then I'm going to do it. And I'm not setting myself up to be Dungeons and Daddies or emulate them in any shape or form. But it was that sort of like, hang on a second, there is room here to tell all kinds of stories, and even tell the same story. I'm looking at doing a stream for Curse of Strahd with another group, and I know for a fact it'll be different. I'm going to take inspiration and influence from the other groups that I'm running, but I'll be running a different game of Strahd because I have different players, and I would get bored if I ran it the same way, and did the same stuff all the time, like any of us, like any DM would. It's about giving yourself that freedom to be creative and enjoy it. Like that's the secret. Enjoy it. Like I've given away loads of secrets tonight, by the way. Just like, I enjoy what you're doing, and you don't owe it to anybody but yourself and your players. And like we said, it's a collaborative experience. So they're bringing as much to this as you are. You're the person doing the notes, and you're the person looking at maps and looking at stat blocks and stuff like that. But they're preparing for those moments, and they're the ones bringing that story to life for you. So it is, there's only it's only you and the 4 or 5 or 6 if you really want to stress yourself. 7 if you hate yourself. 8 if if you've got 10 hours to spare. I see some of these groups, Nate, and I'm like, how is there like 8 people in that group? Like, what? How does combat go?
I think the most I've ever heard reference was about 12. I think someone said they had
Oh.
12 at their table once, and they said they would never do it again. It was an absolute terrible mistake, and it was like the first one they'd ever done, DM'd as well, or something like that. Yeah, it was ridiculous. But
Hats off if I can, but no, not for me.
But yeah, you were saying about the players and that. I don't want to go on too much longer. I don't want to take too much more time. But one of my favourite moments or things that my players do is when they contact me outside of game and they say, "I've had an idea about my character." I nearly said client again. And they the fact that a is the fact that they're just thinking about it at all is lovely. But equally that they want to enhance the story in some way, and they need me to get on board. Now, I'm the sort of DM that I'm willing to work with them totally, 100%. I want them to have the best game they possibly have, and equally that hopefully it pays back to me. But equally, I want it to be a surprise to them. So if one of them says to me, "I want to do this," I'm sort of like, yeah, but just leave that with me. I'd rather you gave me the bones that I could do something with. So, because otherwise, if you come to me and say I want this and that and everything to happen to my character, when it happens, it's all a bit like, well, you knew that was going to happen. It was just a matter of time. And what is there to role play? I'd rather it was a moment. To some degree, I've had conversations with them where I have had to work through it because I wanted to get it right. But equally, I just so with ours, just very briefly, like you said there about putting your own creativity into it. We're running Storm King's Thunder, but for each of them, I've got these side quests essentially built into either their backstory or their personality, something that I hope will be engaging to them. And yes, it means they all got their spotlight. There will be a story that is particularly for Dweezil, one for Dabov, one for whatever, and it might feel a bit clunky in that it's just these things that aren't organically coming into the story. But it means I'm creative. It's giving them something that personality-wise and hopefully them as players are going to engage with, rather than just this random story about giants that we're just playing for the sake of it. And yeah, just hopefully means that they're bringing their A game into it, because it means that little bit more to them.
Yeah, because they're invested.
Yeah, fantastic. Right, lovely stuff. Yeah, I don't think I've got any other questions on that side of life, unless there's anything else. Any more secrets? Any more Declan do's and Declan don'ts?
Declan do. A big do is because we, again, Nate, we the TTRPG community quite a bit, and one of the things I often see brought up is, do a session zero. Yes, 100%. Have a chat with your players about the game. You don't have to tell them the plot, but what's the story? What are we looking at? What's the tone? What are your your lines and veils? Things that you just cross, things that you're not comfortable with. Understand your players, let them understand you, and then that helps the thing. The do here is do check in. Things change for players outside of this, and a story heading in a certain direction might be a little too close to something they're experiencing. Maybe it's a little too much right now because their head's not in a great place. I'm not saying sit down, a cup of tea, and put them on the long couch and have them, and counsel them, but do check in with your players throughout. And I'm not talking about whether it's for a podcast or a stream. I'm talking about your friends at that table, those strangers at that table. A couple of weeks into it, how is everybody getting on? Is the game too heavy? Is it too much? Can I pull it back? Could I go further with it? What do you want? And just do that little check-in periodically. I'm not saying every session. Don't and this is something I should get tattooed on my own forehead. Don't compare yourself to the other DMs or the other players. Just don't. It's ridiculous. You're never going to be you're never going to be Matt Mercer. You're never going to be Nate from Dice and Desire. You're just not, or Anthony from Dungeons and Daddies. And you don't have to be. That's the best part of it. You don't have to be. You are the DM at that table. You have players in front of you. They are there. They trust you. So don't compare yourself to the others. And if there's someone sitting at your table, oh, that's not how Matt would do it, or that's not how Nate would do it, or Declan would do it. Great. I'm glad I've come up with a different way of doing it. Enjoy it. Now roll the dice and see what happens. So. Yeah, that would be my don't. Don't compare yourself to the others. Just enjoy and do your own way.
Yeah. I just very circling back to something you said about imposter syndrome right early in the show. With D&D and DMing, it's easy because obviously you're very responsible for the story. It's probably why we as DMs probably do have that, because you want to make sure that you're telling it right and the number of people at your table are understanding it and enjoying it, etc., etc. But someone said on Twitter or to me, or I can't remember where it came up, but someone said, as long as those people are still coming back to your table, you're doing something right. Yeah. If people start going, I can't play anymore, I mean, obviously within reason, they might have legitimate reasons, like they've moved across the world and they just can't do it. But if they are free and able to, and they're still coming back, you are clearly doing something right. You're clearly doing something that brings them back. So that's ultimately the biggest thing you need to worry about. And usually, hopefully, you're playing with friends that you trust and they trust you anyway. And touch wood, there's not going to be that.
And
issue,
that's also the biggest compliment that you can take from it as well. That they are coming back. They want to be in your story. They want to tell that story with you. So, yeah, exactly. I 100% echo that big time.
Right. Excellent. Lovely. Right. Last thing we're going to do before I let you go, Declan. D6. Do you have a D6?
I do. Yep.
Okay. We are going to play roll your. No, that's not what it's called. We're going to play Your Bards Right.
Okay.
For those that have not listened to the show before, this is basically a rip-off of Play Your Cards Right. What we're going to do is I'm going to start the game by giving Declan a creature. He's going to roll the d6 and just determine which of the ability scores that we're going to be working with: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, or charisma. I'm going to give him a creature and tell him what the score is in that particular thing. And from there, he's just going to guess higher or lower on the next creature. It's completely random. It could be, he could get many, many answers right. He could get many, many wrong, or, well, one wrong and he's out anyway. Right, are you ready, Declan?
Yes, I am, yeah.
Could you roll me a d6 then, please, and tell me what one we're playing with tonight?
2.
2, dexterity. You are the first person to play dexterity, so the good news is, regardless of what happens tonight, you are the best person that has ever played dexterity. Right, okie dokie. Right, so your opening creature for dexterity is a fire giant with dexterity of 9. Do you think the next character will be more or less dexterous? More than 9. Okay, let's have a look. Fingers crossed for you. We've got a unicorn, which is 14.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the next creature will be more or less?
Less.
Ooh. It's a skeleton, which is also 14. Now, the way that works is I allow you to continue, but you do not get the point for it.
Fair enough.
So, so currently you've only got the 1 point, but yes, higher or lower than 14 on skeleton?
I'll go lower again. Yeah.
Lower again.
No.
Oh, Declan. A flump's done you.
Of course it would be a flump.
15, only just as well, I'm afraid. Oh my goodness, 1 point. I'm
gonna put a flump. I'm gonna put a flump in Romancing the Dungeon.
Put a flump in. Make him stuck or something, so he can't move at all.
Yes.
Give him disadvantage at any.
Yeah, I gotta have Rod's Great First break his legs or something.
Oh, I'm so gutted for you.
No,
oh well.
I'll take a point. It's better than no points. So
it is absolutely better than no points. What a lovely positive way to look at it. Declan. That's been lovely. Thank you very much for joining me tonight and spending your time with me. It's been a long time coming. I wanted to get you on anyway. You've always been one of the people I wanted on this show, but obviously, given that I was on your one-shot Couples Retreat, which you should go and listen to, as well as everything else. But Couples Retreat was a fantastic bit of fun, and obviously, as we're recording it, the second of another one shot that you did with, who was the guys you did that with? That was
Tallest Heroes, the from Chicago.
Yeah. But yeah, go and listen to everything that they have done. It's fantastic fun, and as soon as when you asked me on there, I thought, right, it's an opportune moment. I would have loved to have got you on earlier, but circumstances didn't work. It would have been nice to have them line up, but there you go. Regardless, you've been on now. You've been a fantastic guest. I've loved having you on. Before you go, just tell us where people can find you and the podcast. Also, anything, I think obviously by the time this goes out, the live stream that you would have done would have happened. I'm sure it was an absolute banging success. Well done. So. Fantastic achievement. Hopefully and that was for charity, right? So that's hopefully lots and lots of money has been raised for that. But yeah, tell people where people can find you, and do you know when season 2 will hopefully be dropping?
Sure. So you can find anything to do with Romancing the Dungeon. You can find at D8 Dungeon on all the social media channels. I'm hoping to start a new campaign, a new stream on Twitch. under the D8 dungeon umbrella, but another world, another story, whole new characters and players called Rise of the Forsaken. That's hopefully starting at the end of August, beginning of September. Me personally, you'll find at Declan and DDY on Twitter. It's the only kind of real social media outlets that I use. And for whimsical posts about my underpants and the ethics of DMing in set, find them there. Season 2 of Romancing the Dungeon is out in September. About the middle of September, like I said, we've already recorded 6 episodes, and we're hoping to record another 3 episodes. And I am super excited. I'm also super worried because I can't say anything. I can't say anything, Nate. I can't. I haven't even told players. It hasn't happened yet. In my head, it's happened, and I keep reliving the fear of it. I think there might be pitchforks and torches, but we'll see. We'll see.
Do you anticipate any greasy peanuts?
Oh my god, that thing needs to die a horrible death. That's gonna be on my tombstone. I just know it. That 80 years from now, when I pass away at the ripe old age of 115, Sam is gonna trundle on by and just put a packet of King Peanuts on my tomb. I just know it. I don't know where that came from. That is all. Greasy peanut. Poor Sops. Funny you bring him up though. He'll be that'll be a nice little thing for season 2.
Oh, there you go. Lovely little sizzler. Right, thank you very much, Declan. Please go and follow, do the things, listen to them. Please listen to them. It's the whole point of doing these shows, to highlight great shows out there. And they are absolutely one of the best that I've listened to. I'm so excited for season 2. I cannot overstate that. So yeah, lovely. And this is actually the end of season 1 of DM and DMer. Declan was the BBEG of the whole thing. He's
dramatic reveal.
He's killed all of the other guests. They're all gone, I'm afraid. His master plan has worked and he's survived. Will there be a season 2? Hopefully. I don't know when that will be. Later this year, maybe next year. I don't know. I'm actually starting Curse of Strahd myself very, very soon.
Oh, player or DM?
Player.
Oh.
I basically said on Twitter the other day, I wish there was an 8th day of the week and somebody wanted to play Curse of Strahd with me. And someone said, well, I can't do much about the 8th day, but I can certainly DM for you. And I was like, okay, there we go. I'm going to play Strahd. I don't know why, it's just always appealed to me. Of all the pre-mades, it's just the one that's just always spoken to me, even though I know that it's supposedly ruthless. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. So that's why there might not be one for a while, but there'll be another DM and DMer series soon. And thank you for listening for these 6 episodes. Please go and check out all of the previous guys. I was going to say girls, but there weren't any. All the guys that have featured on here. And I'll be back with a new episode of this whenever I can. Good night. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button on your favourite podcast app to ensure you don't miss any future instalments of Dice and Desire. And in the meantime, if you want to interact with us, come and find us on Twitter and Instagram @Dice and Desire.